on the web, because you've got some interesting looking videos that you've made about your coaching philosophy, among other things. You do a bit of coaching, right?
Not really. So I'm a kind of physio by trade, and then obviously I have a background in running. So I have a PhD, and I lecture on, like, say, physiology and biomechanics.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah, I was meaning to introduce you actually along those lines, but I was gonna introduce you. So I'll just I don't need to now because you've done it already. But I'm interested in your sort of philosophy, if you like, on partly slow running, but also the different zones of running that you recommend. And also, you talk about neuromuscular versus aerobic sort of training. Can you touch on? Well, let's start with the first one. So you talk about slow running and why it's important with your training. Why is that, in your opinion?
Well, I find a lot of runners, and you would see it in a lot of trail runners or people who are doing the longer distances. Those zones are important. So to answer why the slow running, I think it's important just to talk about two of those zones for a minute. So I would recommend people to get like a lactic threshold test if they can. You can get them in the UK or Ireland for very cheap if you just like search lactic threshold test. Generally, it sounds like something that's going to cost a lot of money. Now, this isn't a VO2 test. This is a lactic threshold test. So what you do is they go on a treadmill, they take a little bit of blood from your ear, you gradually increase the pace you're running. You have a heart rate strap on, don't use your wrist one. And as you pick up the speed, the amount of lactic you have in your blood increases, and from that we can judge certain zones. When you're 100% aerobic, there's zero increase in your lactic, so it's kind of flat. There'll come a certain point where the lactic comes up slightly, and at that point you're now training maximally kind of aerobic. So at that point, that's like where your body really has to work to stay fully aerobic. Okay, there's certain amount of anaerobic, like 5%. Now that's perfect for aerobic training. So I recommend people to do that, and we call that zone 2. So that first spike, or sometimes it's called aerobic threshold. That first spike is really important. I train that at least once a week. For trail runners, like then if you keep going faster, you get up to like 2.2, 2.5. The numbers aren't super important. The person doing the test will tell you that. That's like your marathon pace. So obviously zone 2 and zone 3 are very important for people, say, doing marathons. And I know we kind of talked, we might focus a little bit more on marathons today, that those zones are important because that's the pace that you have to run. So there's a thing in your training called like specific adaptation to imposed demand, which means that you have to train your body the way you want it to respond. It doesn't, just getting generally fit doesn't improve things. So if you do loads of sprinting, you're not getting better at trail running. If you do loads of trail running, you're not just going to get better at, like, say, a 5K. You need to be specific. And it's the same with your systems. Your aerobic system has to be trained. Now, I'm long-winded, classic Irishman. What I see a lot of people do is on a recovery run, an easier run, so that's zone 1, we call that aerobic recovery. They run too fast on that run. They don't run fast enough to get into zone 2. So they're not getting that, like, they're not challenging the aerobic system to really get that aerobic benefit, but they're running too fast not to recover. So what people have to, as I said, if you got one test, when I was 18, I got a test done and my heart rates are roughly the same as I am now. I'm 36. If you got one test, you know for life. And again, they only cost about £100. You know, if you go to a university or just look up on Google, you'll find a lactic threshold test, not a VO2 max. That's irrelevant.
So if you live in Devon, you'd probably find somewhere at Plymouth University.
Oh, definitely. Anywhere where it's doing like a physiology degree, or like a lot of coaches will have them as well. Like the actual things are not expensive to buy. Like I have one, As I said, I don't even coach, but I just, like it every so often for someone to do a test, or I have a friend who coaches and I send him there. So, and he just has a treadmill and one of these analyzers. The analyzer costs about €400. But it's just to think about. It's like when you're running easy, it should be easy. You should be able to talk. You can go with anyone really. And then if you do have a run in the week, you want to make sure it is zone 2, where it's not hard. You're still able to chat away someone. You're just concentrating slightly. Generally, if I was given rough figures, a zone 2 run is going to be roughly between 145 beats to someone to max about 155. Roughly, but everybody's heart rate's different. So I really recommend if you could get that test done one time with your heart rate monitor, it would just really allow you to dial into your specifics.
It's a good tip, because I'd say I've been running all my life. I've never had a lactate test, which is kind of crazy, isn't it?
It's not crazy, Kerry, because it, depending on when you start, and depending on, especially people who do longer distances, say like yourself, or who do trial running, they generally get into it more on the enjoyment side. They see that they're quite good at this, then they get better. And you never realize, you think, a laboratory test, that's going to cost a fortune. It doesn't click with people that this is something I could be doing. But everybody out here is putting in time and effort. And again, like, me, I'm a physiotherapist. I'm a Pilates instructor. That's kind of my background. So it's like I have no like horse in this race, like I'm literally only saying this so people will benefit, but they don't. It's like you don't think about that, so you never even try it. And it's not the money, it's not the time. It's just that we don't think, God, you know what, I could actually get that. We think that's for Jakob Ingebrigtsen and elite marathon runners, and it really isn't. It's like cheap. One time is all you'd ever need really to do it. You'd have your zones basically for life.
So subjectively speaking, you kind of recognize the symptoms, don't you? Maybe less as you get older, when it's harder to get into the anaerobic zone. But burning lungs, perhaps wobbly legs. What are the classic symptoms of anaerobic threshold?
So if really the one, if you're going to do it, you could try. If you're going to just try something yourself, I would link it to ventilatory threshold, which is your breathing rate. So you should be able to sing a full line of a song without having to take a breath. So if you said like happy birthday to you and then needed a breath, that's fine. But if you're like happy birthday to you, you're going too fast. So you should have a full line of a song.
Yeah.
If you have 2 or 3 lines, you're probably going a bit too easy. If you're getting like, if you're having to breathe before that, you're going way too hard. Generally, again, about 80% to 85%. The thing as well is that people have to get, with that specific adaptation, you can't improve aerobic, and this is so important for, say, marathon runners. Trail is slightly different. I would say you need a lot of aerobic and you need good muscular endurance. So I do think doing some kind of like strengthening work. It's like steeplechase runners. It's slightly different. Your muscles need to be a lot stronger, and you will have aerobic components, but generally, or anaerobic components, but generally be aerobically really fit and actually physically strong, like your muscles strong, and you'll do really well. But if your legs are burning or you're breathing too fast, say if you don't do a test, you're better to be 10% under what you think than 10% over. Because if you're 10% under, you're still in the aerobic zone. Now, you're not getting 100% aerobic benefit, but you're still in the aerobic zone, improving there. Mm-hmm. If you go 10% over, you're in the anaerobic zone. Now what you're teaching your body is, that's what like I started with 800 meters. Like that's what an 800 meter runner does. Because what you have to teach yourself is to tolerate lactic, to tolerate when your legs are burning, to still be able to run smoothly. But nobody can sustain that from like 5K and above. You know, it's like 95% aerobic. When you get to like marathon or whatever, it's like 99% aerobic. So people think I'm going hard, I'm pushing it, I'm working hard in this workout or this session. but actually it's like you haven't really improved the thing you need to improve. So it's funny, like by going slower, especially in workouts, keeping it aerobic, like you should always feel like, I lived over in Newcastle, and he's dead now, God rest him, but he was a great coach, Lindsay Dunn. Always you should feel like you can do one more rep. So if you're doing 5 by say 7 minutes at lactic or at aerobic threshold, so say like marathon pace, you should always feel like if I had to, I could do another one. You should never feel like at the end of that, it's like, oh my God, like, you'll be tired, but it should never be, this is all I have. You should always feel, I could do another one of those. And if you did that, the first year I did that for cross country, I went up, I remember talking to my coach. I was kind of working with a different coach who was more aerobic. And I was like, I'm going to run terribly. And I qualified for Ireland for the cross country, and I was 33 at the time. And then I never, in all the years when you're running really well, 1500 meters and doing well, I'm working harder in the winter, never qualified, never got near it. But because I had been going slower, I'd actually been 100% working my aerobic system, as opposed to going harder and actually improving my anaerobic system. So you see people doing thresholds, especially if they're working with someone who's better than them. They try kind of keep up with them in training, and then they wonder why on race day that guy's beating them by 30 seconds, a minute, and they're way back down. It's like, because they're working aerobically when you're working anaerobically. And you would be closer to that person if you let them off, say, 30 seconds or a minute in training, because then you would be working aerobically, they would be working aerobically, and then maybe in the race your anaerobic system could help you get closer.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I'm familiar with Lindsay Dunn's philosophy, because I used to train with Lindsay quite a long time ago.
Did you? Yeah, you're such
before your time. I'm a bit older than you, Owen. So it raises some questions, what you've just said. Really interesting. A couple of questions that come to mind are, firstly, because we have a broad audience here, so broad church. So we'll also have ultra runners who'll probably say, anaerobic threshold, we don't need to even know about that. Okay, so I'm going to ask you about that in a second. The other one is, because you might disagree with that.
I do disagree with that, yeah.
Well, yeah, I thought you might. There's muscle fiber type, so fast twitch, slow twitch composition. So is it true to say that runners who do not have a significant fast twitch fiber component can really get into the anaerobic zone? Or is it just the case that actually they get into it quicker and therefore need to train it better?
Yeah, like your twitch component will make a difference, because if you're faster, you'll see 800-meter runners, when they do like a lactic threshold training session, usually they can go very hard, they'll spike their heart rate, and then they'll actually be running a lot slower. Someone who has more, say, slow twitch fibers will more be gradually up and then hold. But the aerobic threshold isn't as much about like you feeling hard. It's like everybody be able to get into it eventually. It's just knowing at the peak, say, as I said, a slow twitch, it might take them 5 to 10 minutes, which is a better way to get into it. A fast twitch, it could be within 1 minute, and then they slow down off that pace because their heart rate can't hold their lactic. What's more important is that both of them, when they hit the zone, don't keep going higher and higher. Because at an aerobic threshold or a lactic threshold, you definitely will be able to go faster. You're only doing 80, 85%. So it shouldn't feel flat out. If it does, you're way above it. So that works for an ultra runner as much as it works for a 800-meter runner.
Yeah, I hear you. So just to use a sort of maybe one end of the spectrum, maybe a bit different end of the spectrum too, because you're still competing fairly elite levels, right? Masters level anyway. So
yeah, no, good level. Yeah, still like ran 14 minutes for 5K this year.
Exactly, and I think you won the European
Masters. Yeah.
3,000 meters.
3,000.
Yeah. So you're still kicking out good times. If you go to sort of the other end of the spectrum, if you like, the sort of more recreational fell running type end of the spectrum, you get a runner who maybe you get a group of runners who are starting off conversational pace, because you quite often get chit chat even at the front of the fell race, As it goes on, they experience some difficult contours and hills and tricky terrain, and maybe they're going downhill at breakneck speed, maybe running 2.5 minute kilometers, even in some cases. And so presumably they then some of them enter that anaerobic zone, which means when they come to the final hill or whatever, they're done for. So is it true to say that you can even train your anaerobic threshold in a fell race or in a longer ultra race? Sorry if you've already partly answered that question.
No, I think, and look,
asking the question.
The one thing I feel like is this is very theoretical, so it's hard. Yeah. So the more we can break it into like specifics, it really does help people. Generally, I wouldn't feel like you would go into aerobic. Aerobic more is to do with your systems. What the person I feel like on that fell run would need to be really working on is that strength training, that eccentric load. So sometimes when you're falling down a hill, you're actually like you're not like the surface is too unsteady. So while people, and look, fell runners it's widely accepted lunatics. Like let's call a spade a spade. As a non-fell runner, it's like, what are they doing? But like so they do really descend quickly, because I remember doing one of those races just as a kind of a bit of crack, as we say here in Ireland.
Yeah, and you got tugged into it.
Yeah, but I couldn't believe how fast people actually ran down the hill. I was like, they have no regard for their lives. But you're still eccentrically braking. Your muscles are still working to slow you down slightly. Like no one is going to run as fast as they can. So really what it is when you come down that hill, aerobically you're fine because you've had gravity helping you, but it's actually like eccentric, the strength in your muscles to stop your body from, like, say, going face planting on the hill is the thing that you've worked. So your legs are going to be like, the muscles themselves have really worked hard, like a strength training session. So again, if people are getting into fell running seriously, they should be doing some kind of like strength training at least once per week, and I would recommend that for, say, cross country as well. Where you see it on fell running or ultra marathons, it's as important. It's more important here. It's more important. So if you're doing a marathon, the key number you want to look at from the research is 2.2 millimoles of lactic. Now, if you get that test done, the lactic threshold is generally 4 millimoles. So after that point, any improvement in your time is purely anaerobic. You're going to be getting your legs burning. But you can't run a marathon at lactic thresholds. It's impossible. But they found that 2.2 is as fast as we can go and sustain that nicely. So even if they give you the results afterwards, ask them to point. Most people will give you the right zones, but ask them to point out, what heart rate was I at? Heart rate is the thing, because as I said, you were getting kids ready this morning. Someone has a job. The pace can change. The heart rate roughly is always the same. If I'm a bit sick, it'll be higher. I'll be going slower. If I'm feeling great, it'll be lower. I can go faster. So whatever your heart rate was at 2.2 millimoles, that some people can get away with 2.5, but that's a good point for them to run marathon pace at. And then obviously trail running is lower, maybe just at like that zone 2, in the middle of zone 2 for a long time, and then they can pick it up. Because what kills people is, we're not talking about maximal running, obviously. Like, if a marathon pace, you can run a lot faster when you do a 5k. So people get into a pace that feels hard, but no, I'm okay here, and they can be chatting, but what happens is they're probably overloading the aerobic system. So by the time it comes towards the end or in the middle, they really start faltering, because they've, earlier on in the race, what felt okay was actually too fast.
Yeah.
So it's more important for the longer distances, because you can't rely on the anaerobic system at all. So if you go anaerobic, it's like, it's too long. If you're in a ultra, like a marathon, it's like you can't run. Where, like, say for a 5k, even if it went poorly, and say I got to 4k aerobic, I can kind of gut out another k at anaerobic.
Yeah.
But I can't do that for like, say, 4 or 5 miles if it's left.
Yeah. Got you. Yeah, it totally makes sense. I'm a bit scared now, Owen, because I noticed you mentioned 5 training zones, and so far you've mentioned 2 so far. So I'm just wondering what those other 3 are.
You got zone 1. Zone 1 is aerobic recovery. That's just an easy run.
Okay.
Zone 2 is Zone 1 is an aerobic recovery. Zone 2 is that what we call aerobic threshold. It's the point where your aerobic system is working its hardest, basically. Yeah. Usually between 140 beats to maybe 155 max.
Got you.
Zone 3 is what we call extensive aerobic. That's generally marathon pace. You know, so that 2.2 millimoles. Generally for people about 150, if you have a low heart rate, to like 160, 165 is generally what I see people there. Okay. Zone 4, it can be a little bit higher. That's why it's important to get the lactic test. But Zone 4 is your threshold. What Zone 4 is that's the lactic threshold we always hear about. That's tempo, that's threshold work. After that point, you can't run any quicker without it being 100% aerobic, anaerobic. And over that then is Zone 5, which would be like VO2 max. So that's like our track work, our interval work, you know, where we're not worried about heart rate.
Yeah. Okay. So I was looking at Ingebrigtsen. There's quite an interesting. Maybe you could say he's an outlier. I don't know if you would say he is. His kind of training. Now I've seen it said that he does a lot of slow running, but from what I could see, it doesn't seem like it is awfully slow. His so-called slow running. I mean, maybe it is by the rest of his training standards. Yeah. But for example, he does an awful lot of quality. He does an awful lot of. Fast intervals. What I looked at was in the sort of 14-day lead up to a race. And, he crams in 2 sessions in one day, for example, 2 quality sessions in one day. And he might do, I think it's anything up to like 6 sessions a week. Maybe it's a bit less than that, leading up to a race, which seems like a lot. And it maybe that's peak season, and it's not off season would be different, but
no, they do 2 sessions. They wouldn't do 6 a week, would be a lot, but they definitely do 2 on the one day. So they do Now the only thing is, this is where other people go wrong. And as I said, we can bring it back to anyone. It's like if you're running with a 3-hour marathoner and you're a 3-hour 30 marathoner, remember that person has 30 minutes on you. So when you're doing a session together, don't forget that person is 30 minutes quicker than you. Because what can happen is you can think either, oh, I'll run with him and I'll be closer. It's like his aerobic system is so much more developed. So the Ingebrigtsens, they are meticulous on aerobic, like meticulous. So even though the pace looks really fast, like that guy thresholds like 28 minutes for a 30 for a 10K. Yeah. Like, so they're on their dad always has like the lactic monitor with them.
Yeah.
And once it goes above 3 millimoles, they're done. So once it goes closer to their lactic threshold on that first session, they finish the session, even though they could be doing sub 3 minute Ks.
Got you.
For a lot of times. And then the other session again is like 400 meters, but at like their 10K pace. Again, so not like overly, they're never going like hard to the well, but what they do then is a lot of distance. Now they don't do a lot of actual distance, they do quality, as you said, like his long run isn't that long, but their sessions have a lot of bulk to them.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Yeah, which is why he always seems to be running comfortably. I mean, you watch him run, he always seems to be quite comfortable. Well, I say him.
Yeah. No, and the great thing about that training is, now we will talk about if you are a neuromuscular athlete, because I'm actually a neuromuscular athlete. So.
Yeah, I'm interested in this. So go on, explain.
Well, this is just something I've kind of come up with myself, that there's 2 types of athletes. There's aerobic athletes, and then there's neuromuscular athletes. Aerobic athletes are people who generally just do really well off threshold and easy strides. So there's a lot of people who, when they got into training, they do best off base work. So they do a race, say if it's 5K or 10K, they're just doing like base training and some strides or hills, and they go do an early race. And in the early race, they run their best. They run a PB, or they run a season's best. And then they start doing like specific, say 10K work or specific like 5K work for the 5K. And even now they're doing like track workouts or they're doing harder like interval workouts, their actual times decrease and they feel fried. And they're wondering why that's the case. What I've observed over the years is that that person then is an aerobic runner. They do best off a big aerobic base, not taxing the nervous system. Because running fast is a tax on the nervous system.
Yeah.
And that seems to fry, their nervous system gets fried. So then when they race, they can't replicate that. So that person is better off with longer breaks between their races. Just doing strides or like 4x20-second hills with a walk back at the end of an aerobic type session. And they seem to run the best then.
That's a really interesting observation because you don't often hear that. And I've noticed that too over the years. You can see some real quality athletes who kind of peak early on and then maybe they go backwards a bit and then they peak again and they go backwards a bit. And it's hard to explain. That explanation seems like a good one. I'd also throw into the mix there. I wonder also, you're talking about the nervous system. Maybe you could also be talking about the endocrine system. If there's a sort of maybe slightly higher anxiety type of runner, or maybe a type of runner who's perhaps more affected by their hormones, or goes up and down like this from day to day, who is maybe not just in terms of mood, but in terms of energy levels, is going to be more vulnerable to that, and therefore they can't do copy and paste kind of training that is ascribed to other kinds of runners.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as you get older, so we can talk about neuromuscular in a second because it differs, but I think as I've got older, like having 90% of your training by minutes and by heart rate is especially if you're a person, because if you have a hard session, emotionally people can be absolutely drained, and that's hard if you got kids and a job. So doing things more by minutes, doing things by like feel, you'll be surprised that you'll get the same benefit, but you probably won't be putting the same emotional tax. So I think that's an excellent point, Kerry. I hadn't thought about that, but that could definitely be one, that they're stressed about that session, and then over weeks it's like you can't have that emotional stress without it taking a toll physically.
Because you also see athletes who sort of beat themselves up a bit about their training, sort of internalize it a little bit, and that potentially could have another effect. I guess.
Well, I think I ran crap for like 1 year in particular, and I coached, they were telling, it's in your head, and it's like you're not, you're grand, and I was like thinking, oh God, I have no heart here. Why am I giving up in these races? And trying to be positive. And the next year, actually, I was training with Lindsay, had the same mindset, but it was negative talk, and I actually ran brilliant. And when I was going home, I was like, you know what? I just wasn't fit last year. So I think 95% of the time, runners think, oh, it's like I'm not mentally strong enough, or why do I always tire at the end of a race and I can't come through, or in the middle of the race I really falter and then I come fast at the end. What's wrong with me mentally? And it's like, it's nothing to do with your mentality. Runners have a lot of heart if you're out there doing it, and I believe a lot that it's totally that your level of fitness, like 100% your level of fitness.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I agree with you. I think most runners are, by definition, self-disciplined, and because they've chosen to do this thing.
And everybody wants to do. You want to do your best, but it's like if you're not fit enough, sometimes it's easier when you look back. You go, you know what? I wasn't actually that fit, or I was going out too hard, and that causes it. And again, with running, it's especially with long distance running, it's like, it's not like a sprint where you can just gradually go back and you can feel yourself fighting. It's like your aerobic system's like, we can't keep going at this pace.
Yeah.
Just to say, the neuromuscular system, then the neuromuscular runner is someone who needs some of those interval races, or they need running at the specific time. So say for a trail runner, some trail runners would do brilliant if they're just doing aerobic runs, some hills to practice, and then they can go run a great race, and then give themselves a break to get the aerobic base back up and go run another race. Others would need really specific sessions like, fell runners to need specific sessions on the mountains or on the hills at the kind of pace that they want to run broken up, because their nervous system, rather than get fried, it needs to be kind of woken up to that pace. I would be that type of runner.
You're that type of runner.
I had a year where I was doing all lactic threshold work and aerobic work, which I really recommend, as we said, but 3 weeks before the race, if I keep doing that, it's like, once I'm in the race, it's like, oh my God, this is the fastest. I can panic then, because I have no feel of like, how I should be running. Where then I started doing that work again, and I can click in. It's like, oh yeah, this is like that session I did last Saturday. This is exactly how I feel. And my body seems to need that type of running. And that's not just like, oh, he's talking about fast running. When I now do a 10K, some people would do brilliantly. Like my friend did just do threshold work and a couple of strides, or a couple of intervals at that pace with longer recovery. For me, I need to I would do maybe 2 miles of threshold, and then I do like 10 or 20 of 400s or 600s or whatever at the pace I'm going to run. I don't have to run way quicker than that, but I need to run at that pace.
So what you're saying is, if you are an aerobic type runner and you try to do a sort of a neuromuscular type of training, eventually it would stress you.
You'll fry. You'll fry.
Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting. And I'm
sure. Then if you're a neuromuscular runner and all you do is aerobic training, it'll feel like the races will feel like too fast. You'll never feel like you're getting, you never feel like you're getting the best out of yourself. So you generally know it by when do you run your best. If you're running your best off early races, or when you have a break and then a good race, and that you come into form quickly, you're probably an aerobic runner.
Yeah.
If you run your best, if your aerobic system goes down a lot in your break and you run your best, say a few races in, you need a good few races to get better, you're probably a neuromuscular runner.
Yeah. I wonder if you can change from a aerobic to a neuromuscular, or vice versa.
There's no point. I feel like you need running economy. You need to be practicing. I don't think so. I think it's like ingrained that you're.
Yeah, I wonder, because there's a lot of talk now, isn't there? Sorry, this is going more into a sort of Zen type meditation type conversation, but there is a lot of talk now that you can train your parasympathetic system.
Yes.
When, through meditation or just learning to relax, or maybe you just get a grip of your life in some way or other, where previously you had anxiety and then you don't. I wonder if it's possible, therefore, to apply that to your running. If you can apply it to your
definitely
person.
Is definitely to apply. Like I still do. I have a nap every day or a meditation. So all of us should be bringing back your nervous system, because any kind of running is going to heighten you. So it's something to center yourself again. But this is just more about what would be your general prep. Now you probably could dampen the negative effect of the neuromuscular training, say, especially if you're an aerobic runner. But you've got to wonder, would you improve if you improved your aerobic more? Would you get more out of it? So Jakob Ingebrigtsen is a 100% an aerobic runner. He only does aerobic sessions. But because he's developed his aerobic system so well, if you looked at the sessions, you think, oh yeah, he must be a neuromuscular runner, because he's running 240s for a case. But he's like, that's in his aerobic zone now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, because this is basically my own observation, and it might be absolute bullshit. Excuse me, but just watching Ingebrigtsen come second to Jake Whiteman. Great achievement by Jake Whiteman.
Yeah, brilliant.
I almost felt as though he didn't quite have that extra gear.
No, he doesn't have that gear.
Doesn't have that gear. So with the Co, to compete with the likes of Co, who knows, may or may not have been able to keep with Ingebrigtsen, probably could have. He wouldn't have had that extra gear to cope with that kind of turn of speed, Steve Ovett type turn of speed.
No, he wouldn't. But he'll never have that.
Yeah.
And the problem is, sometimes you think if he trained like them, he could beat them, but he wouldn't ever. Because what would happen him, in my opinion, is he would then start shocking the system. His aerobic wouldn't be as good, So he's a 1500 meter 5K guy. Like Jake Whiteman, that's the first time Jake Whiteman's ever beaten him. But Jake Whiteman could absolutely destroy him over 800 meters. He'd probably beat him by about 4 seconds.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 seconds, sorry. But like, you got to play to your strengths and then hope those strengths are good enough. And like even Jakob says there, he should have went harder from 600 meters out, or eventually he'll go to 5K. But like you can't, because they're not your strengths. It's like focus on your strengths, negate the weaknesses. So do your strides and do the things. Or for a neuromuscular runner, focus on your strengths. Do the sessions that you need to bring you on do extra races because you'll get more out of them, and limit your weak links. So make sure you keep your aerobic high, or make sure you keep your running economy high.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because people used to talk about Cram as being a sort of wind up runner. He had to wind it up because he didn't quite have that extra gear in the last finishing straight. I'm talking relative here, but he still had a 800 PB of, I don't know what it was, but it was probably 141.
Cram. Sorry, no, no. I thought you said
probably about 1423 or 3.
Yeah.
Whereas El Garouche had a PB lot slower than that.
Yes,
slower, and yet look at his 1500 meter time. Still,
but then El Garouche was 5K world and Olympic champion, so he's a 5K. So again, they're naturally more like aerobic. So it's just the training they would do. Now you do need to train specifically, but too much of that for an aerobic runner, you're going to fry yourself. Not enough of that. Not doing that stuff 3 weeks out before a big race. For a neuromuscular runner, you're going to be flat as a pancake going into the race.
Yeah, interesting. So, okay. So you also talk about static stretching as not being a bad thing, which obviously that's against the grain of quite a lot of what we're told now. Static stretching is all about dynamic stretching. What's your view on that then?
So the problem is that when people look at research, they look and they saw static stretching is bad before a race, but that research involves someone holding a stretch for 2 seconds or 2 minutes, going on a force plate and jumping as high as they can. Now, no runner in their wildest dreams would on the start line go down and hold a stretch for 2 minutes and expect them to run their fastest. But what happened is people then took that as, oh yeah, static stretching is poor. It's the timing is important. If you do static stretching at the start, especially on the areas that you're tight, then do dynamic after that, it counterbalances the static stretching, the negative effect of static stretching. And that's more like how people actually warm up. So sometimes with research, they just do one thing that doesn't mimic real life.
Okay, yeah. So you're advocating a combination of the two, perhaps static.
Combination. Now you don't do it before the race. So the way I would warm up is a jog. Then so we do a jog for say 15 minutes. Then we do, or for 10 minutes depending on. Then you can do your static stretching or some like foam roll or mobility work. Then do like dynamic drills and stretching, like high knees, bum kicks. So if we're looking at static stretching, one of the key problems is that with the research, people only would hold the research would look at them holding a 2 minute stretch and then going on a force plate and jumping or running. Now, if you're running on the start line, I've never seen any athlete touch their toes for 2 minutes, then go up and the gun fires. Like it's ridiculous. So what happens sometimes is, like, I lecture as well. So, but a lot of the research out there is very theoretical. Like it's very close and it's not practical. But yet the results are being applied practically. So you always hear, oh, you don't do any static stretching before a race. But actually, like, you're better off to, the way I do it is, if you have it at the start, you can target the areas that get tight for you. Like if you're sitting 8 hours, you'd be better off static stretching your hip flexors to loosen them out because they're chronically tight, and then start a more dynamic warm up. So the way I would do it would be like, say, 10 to 15 minutes of a jog. I static stretch every place, holding only for 10 seconds. Do you know, like, so not like 30 seconds, or foam roll the areas that are tight. I might do that even before the jog. Like if I've had to travel to a race, I'll bring a hockey ball, I'll stick it in the middle of my bum, basically. I'll be lying down, I'll roll around, I'll find the area that's tight. If my knees are sore, I'll foam roll my quads. Then I'll go for my 10 to 15 minute jog. I'll come back, I'll hold a static stretch for like 10 seconds both sides, maybe do it twice, calves all the way up. Then I'll start the dynamic portion. So I'll do like high knees. If I'm doing bum kicks, keep your knees out in front and flick your heels. Don't flick back. It's just teaching bad mechanics. So you just keep the knees out in front, but you're still trying to get the heel to the bum. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, and on the walk back, I'll do my dynamic stretching, holding for 2 seconds, say stretch my quad, jog on, hold the other side. Same with my hamstrings. If I've done high knees out, I'll do hamstring 2-second holds all the way back in. I'll do side to sides for my groins, and then just stretch the groins for 2 seconds. But I will have done like 10 seconds, 10 seconds. And then I'll start doing 3 strides. One good thing for people for a race, especially for like say a 5k, 10k race, is to do a 30-second stride at race pace about 10 minutes before the race. It's a thing called VO2 kinetics. Basically, we call it in Ireland getting your second wind if you were playing like field sports, you know. But basically what they found was in a study that people who did a good exertion about 10 minutes out, where you're really breathing hard, so race pace, you don't have to go faster than that, but race pace for about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
For them to get back up to 100% VO2 max, it took 6 seconds because they've already kind of opened up their lungs. For people who didn't do that, it took 30 seconds into the actual trial. So again, I think that's a good idea to do. It gets your body ready. You're not going to be panicking at the start that you're like, oh my God, it's going so fast. Do you know? So that would be, and then I do a couple of shorter strides. So I feel that's a much more appropriate. And it's unpublished at the moment, but we did a research on that where we looked at static, then dynamic versus dynamic. And there was actually zero difference between the two groups on speed, and the actual static and dynamic were slightly better on the power than the other group.
Okay, so you're kind of talking about how sprinters warm up, don't they? Sprinters, you know, I used to watch them down the track in my Loughborough days, and they would spend probably 3/4 of their session.
I know, yeah, sprinters are mad, yeah.
And we all made a joke. We all made jokes about it, but there was a purpose to it, and obviously it's an explosive sport. They have to start warm, etc. But I've always sort of advocated that we don't do enough of those sort of drills and also warm-up routines for longer distances as well.
Yeah, like they are, especially if you're busy, like either you want to try get some strides, you know, like running economy is important. So even if you're an aerobic runner, you need still to be trying to run quicker. So either doing strides at the end of one easier run, or strides before a session are just really important. So having, like, I'm not talking, like our warm-ups would be like 30 minutes max, and 15 of that is jogging. So, you know, high knees, you know, stretching like 10, you're only spending like 4 or 5 minutes stretching, and then high knees as a drill. Even, look, you don't have to stretch, it's just if there's a tight area, I would recommend it. But then your high knees aren't going to take long. Bum kicks, side to side, and then a few strides. It also adds variation to your body. Like a lot of us, we're constantly doing the same thing. Like, and that's why I advocate like the Pilates for people at least once a week, because it changes up the variation. It gets the muscles working in a different way, which keeps our body a lot healthier.
Okay, yeah, interesting. Okay. I was going to ask you what else you do. I know you do Pilates. Do you go to the gym much yourself?
I should go more. I used to go a lot more. I'm generally just doing the Pilates maybe once or twice per week. But at the moment I'm on my downtime. So I'm trying to get like Pilates done once a week, and then maybe the gym done once per week. But you know, we're all busy, aren't we? But I should be going more.
That's it. And the more you become sort of in demand, the more busy you're going to get, the less time you're going to have for your running.
Yeah, well, I always prioritize that. I always do a thing of like, because people have a lot of goals, but I feel like the best one is I know I'm being successful when, because otherwise it never stops. Like, do you know, I've gone to the European Championships, I ran against Inga Britsons, and I tell you, when I got knocked out, you don't feel like, oh my God, I'm a brilliant runner. You feel like, God, why aren't I better? You know, like everybody feels like there's always a level above where you're like, oh my God, I wish could be that good. But like, if you're like, I know I'm being successful when, it's just a really good mindset to be, to prioritize your stuff. So for me, like, because I can be very busy with physio if I wanted, but I know I'm being successful when I have time for my health. I have time for, say, a nap or spend time with my wife. So like that then determines how many jobs I take on. Like obviously you have financial kind of goals of what you think success would be, but like for me now, like a perfect day is like get up, do some running or do some work, go for a run with my friends, because one's a farmer, one works in the army, so they can kind of get out. But if I can do a run there, generally about 10:30, come back. If I get a nap and my lunch, basically the rest, it's just a good day. If I get those things, it's a good day, and then I'll work for whatever else. But like say if I'm having a day working as on physio, obviously if I'm lecturing you don't have as much flexibility, but every day is blocked from 10:30 to say 2, and then I go on again, and it's like that for me is like a great day. So it's like, as you said there, it's like sometimes people can be like, I'll chase this goal, I'll chase that. It's like, what would success look for you? You know that Paulo Coelho story, that one about the fisherman.
The Alchemist?
No. So there's this fisherman in Brazil. This American businessman was he went to Brazil for his holidays, and he's on the beach, he's having a few pina coladas as you do, and he's looking at the fishermen coming in, and like, you know, they're bringing in a certain amount of fish, and this one dude at like 1 o'clock comes in with a mountain of fish, and leaves him, his wife, like they sell whatever, his wife then guts him, and all the other fishermen go back out, and he's a nap, he wakes up at 2, you know, he just seems to go out and they're playing guitar then all night. And he's watching this for a few days with this guy bringing in a mountain of fish. And eventually he just goes over to him. He's like, hi, it's like, how do you catch so much more than everyone that you don't have to go out then in the afternoon? He's like, oh, I have a technique. Like I came up with a special thing I throw into the water. The fish love it. He goes, oh man, you need to prioritize that and get that. If you went back out, you get double the fish. And he's like, why would I do that? He goes, well, if you did that, it's like you could afford other boats around here and buy a bigger fleet. And then he's like, okay, well, why would I do that? He's like, well, if you had a bigger fleet here, you could go to Rio de Janeiro then and set up in different ports. And he goes, okay, why would I do that? It's like, well, if you had a big business in Brazil with different ports, you could come to New York with me and we could try get you on the stock exchange. It's like, why would I do that? It's like, well, if you got on the stock exchange, after about 10 years of good work, you could sell it for millions. It goes, and why would I do that? It's like, well, then you've met it. You can come back here, go fishing in the morning, have a nap in the afternoon, and then just play music all night. So, you know, sometimes if we ask ourselves what we're doing it for, it's like we can have it already. We don't.
It's like a full circle.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what is it that you want? What is success? Not this number, not this thing. It's like, what is it when you're being successful? For someone that might be, oh, if I was, you know, when people are talking about, like I remember chatting to a patient about the Euro Millions, it was like 100 million. And I was like, I wouldn't want to win it. It just, if people knew it, it'd just be hard. She's like, no, it'd be great to win it. It's like, what would you do it? What would you do with it? And she was like, she wanted it, her wall, the front of her wall, so she wouldn't even move house. The front wall needed to be done, and she had to finish an extension in her kitchen. I was like, that's about 40 grand. You got 100 million, you know? So sometimes I think people think, oh, I want this. But if they actually broke it down and said, I know I'm being successful when I do this, I'm successful. When I do this, I'm successful. You can start prioritizing your life. Like, you know, so I see a decent few patients, but I always make sure I have time for a nap. because I love it. Like, as I said, it's a successful day. If I get my nap today, I got to chat to you this morning, it's a good day.
The Spanish have got it licked, haven't they?
They do, yeah. I love a siesta. Just as you were saying, though, that meditation, that down regulation is so important. We're constantly go, go, go. I'm just saying I'm on my phone a lot. Just that time to recenter yourself makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think the so-called Protestant work ethic has got a lot to explain. If there is such a thing.
But again, and I think as well, because phones are here, it's not even working hard. It's like, it's like, don't bring a briefcase to the beach. It's like when you're working, work, and then when you're off. And a lot of us are in this like kind of gray zone where like the phone, we're kind of looking at emails, but not really, so.
Yeah. I love that. I'm going to take that away from this podcast. I'm going to take that away. I know I'm successful when.
Yeah, I know I'm being successful when, and finish those lines. Like, there's good ones.
Yeah, and it usually correlates with feeling happier as well.
Yeah, well, it's like, for mine, I realized a lot of them were to do with time. If I have time for health. So I have time for a run, because as a physio there for a while, I was seeing like 16 people a day. And like I was eating dinner in like 5 minutes I was having my dinner. And then, as you said, there were some days it's like, I don't have time for a run because this patient can't make it. And then you're out there like, okay, you get a lot of money, and it's okay if you're on a build phase. But again, like if like I have a 2011 BMW, but I bought that quite new, and it's like someone scratched it, and it's like, honestly, I was getting really annoyed because someone scratched it. It's like, who owns this car? Does this car own me, or do I own that car? Do you know? Yeah. So
I do know what you're talking about, and I've got somebody reversed into my van recently, so I got given a replacement car until it gets fixed, and it happens to be a BMW. I didn't ask for a BMW, but they gave me a BMW. And I'm now worried even more about it getting scratched.
Yeah.
If it was my car.
And you can have nice cars. Like, I'll probably buy a nice one next. But like, it's just like, we think we can be doing a lot. But if we actually think, it's like, all right, what brings me happiness? And if it is those things, great. And then it's like, but mine would seem to be more time. So then it's like, well, I'm saying this would make me happy or successful when I have these things to do, but then I'm not actually prioritizing it. And I can prioritize it right now. I don't have to be a millionaire first to have time in my day to go for a run. I can actually just schedule my day. I'm lucky enough I can do that. So what am I doing?
Oh, and it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I could definitely talk longer.
Yeah, it's great.
We've both got work to do.
Perfect. If anyone wants to know any more, just have to go to everardpilates.com/book. There's a free book with all these articles and stuff that we talked about.
Okay, yeah, really interesting. It's been great chatting to you, and I hope I get to chat to you again sometime.
Kerry, I really enjoyed this. Yeah, it was excellent.
Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks a million. Take care.